If you've done a lot of inner healing, personal growth, spiritual growth, I'm sure there are moments in your life that you've come across your relationships and thought, have I outgrown this one? And it's such a layered question because, of course, there are relationships in our life that we need to move on from. Either sometimes they're just no longer serving us, and then in the worst case, they're actually harming us, and it's important to move on. But recently, I've also noticed that sometimes when I'm feeling friction or maybe discomfort in some of my relationships, it's actually my ego taking on a new disguise. Because my initial reaction is, ooh, I'm vibrating higher, or I just need to move on. This is no longer serving me. But I'm realizing more and more that sometimes it's actually a potential for growth. And learning this and seeing the difference between these different relationships that we either need to leave or not leave is really humbling in our spiritual growth. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the difference between the two and to see and give tools to understand when is it important for us to leave and when is that discomfort or that kind of like resistance that we're feeling maybe actually the potential for real growth. Maybe that discomfort that you're feeling is actually the portal to a new level in your spiritual journey. Let's dive in. So when we're doing a lot of internal work and we're doing a lot of personal growth things and learning about ourselves, of course, actually a lot of the relationships in our path and on our journey actually kind of come under scrutiny because we're evolving to a certain extent and maybe the other people in our lives aren't evolving in the exact same way. And so sometimes it's really important to be able to move on. And I've done plenty of this in my life, whether it be personal relationships with like my partners or also friendship or even family members. And it's important to give ourselves that grace and also the ability to be able to walk away. It is important sometimes to do that. Sometimes the relationship has just run its course and it's just no longer serving you. And you owe it to nobody to be able to stay in that relationship, especially if it's actually not serving you. Then there's also the abusive and toxic and even harmful relationships. And those are even more important to walk away. The ones in which you do not feel safe not only physically, but even mentally to be able to express yourself or to grow. Or if you're in this, changing, you want to be able to feel free and you need to be able to feel free. And so in those cases, when you're walking away, it's actually serving you. It's actually serving your growth because you're learning to set up boundaries and you're learning to say no, or you're learning to actually express yourself or learning to just be able to own who you are and your new vibration. And so all of those are really important. So I want to be clear. Sometimes walking away from relationships is exactly what you need to do. It is the most self-loving thing that you can do. And it's important that you follow that need. But recently, there's a new category that's come into my life because up until now, I think that when I just thought, okay, this is no longer in alignment, I just moved on because it was actually something that I had to learn to do was to move on. And so then it became almost like a habit. But recently, actually, with a close friend of mine, we kind of got into some friction. Basically, in a recent exchange that we had, she was saying that she felt as if I was always trying to find a positive spin on everything that she was going through. It was almost like I was always trying to find a solution instead of just listening to her. And for sure, at the beginning, I listened to her and I was a little bit like, okay, I can hear that. And, that's definitely happened to me in my life sometimes. And all I needed somebody to do was listen to me. But then afterwards, I realized I had this like growing little anger in me. And I was a little frustrated because I felt almost as if I wasn't able to be myself. Because these days I am learning a lot about trying to be more positive and how when we look at something positive, it's what we focus on that grows. And I'm so excited about what I'm learning and I'm wanting to help other people. And that's the thing when we're growing and we're kind of on this spiritual journey is that we learn things and we all of a sudden want everybody in our lives to also be doing it. We want to help them. And so then I started feeling a little angry. And then I realized that I was actually starting to have the ideas of, okay, this isn't going to work. I'm in a different place and she's in a different place. But then I realized actually, as I was listening to that when she was telling me that, she was in no way asking me to lower my vibration or lower or change the way I am. She was just asking me to accept her where she was. And I realized it was really hard for me and my ego because I realized all of a sudden that she was actually being almost in a way more spiritual, higher vibration because she was accepting me exactly how I was, but I was not accepting her exactly how she was. I was judging her. And it's interesting because this actually came up with my partner about a year ago. And I remember feeling the very same thing. He was being very negative and seeing life in this kind of like very dark way. And I just was feeling very frustrated because at the time I was also, again, trying to be more positive, trying to see the gratitude in everything, not trying to be positively toxic, but also really feeling in my core that if I do shift my focus over to positive things, that is what grows. And so I kind of was frustrated with him, and at the same time also sometimes thinking I needed to separate myself from this person, because I was thinking, well, I can't seem to be able to be better and more positive if I always have somebody dragging me down. But then it's so funny because I realized that, again, he was being a great teacher for me and everything that I'm learning and practicing. Because in the end, if he's negative and I think I'm blaming him for being negative because of him, well, then I'm actually doing the exact same thing that I'm blaming him for doing, that he's blaming everything outside of himself for being negative. And here I am blaming my boyfriend for feeling negative and down. And what's so interesting with my partner is that I realized that the best way to actually help him through whatever he was going through with these negative thoughts and everything, because he was going through a very hard time, that the best way I could help him was actually to love him exactly the way he was, to make him feel safe, to make him feel that he would be loved even if he was negative, to make him feel loved even if this was his way of seeing the world. And I realized that as soon as I did that, like, there was a lot of air that got breathed into the relationship. I grew so much from actually doing something different, by not leaving, by staying, because it was a healthy relationship though. It wasn't dangerous, it wasn't abusive, but I stayed. And through the differences and the friction and like everything that I was kind of going through, I actually grew a lot. So now I want to give you some practical tools on how to decide whether a relationship is good to continue or is it important to leave now. So the first and most important thing is, do you feel safe? Not just your physical safety, that for sure is important, but also emotionally. Do you feel safe to grow? Do you feel safe to be yourself? Do you feel safe to explore things? I know that, for example, with both my friend and also my boyfriend, I do feel safe. I do feel that I'm allowed to try things out. I then am allowed to go backwards and say, oh, actually, I don't think that that's working for me. I don't feel judged. I feel this freedom. And that to me is so important in any relationship, to feel this freedom of being able to grow and to continue to change, because all relationships change, but also we continuously change. And so if we feel that freedom and that possibility, it's super important. The second question to ask yourself is about your ego. To ask yourself, is that uncomfortableness or the discomfort or the resistance, is it really something that is actually, again, harmful to you? Or is it just uncomfortable? And why? The second question to ask is, why do these things upset you? For example, if your partner is not spiritual, what is it that actually bothers you? It's not that he's not doing the practices, or maybe it's the alignment, or is it the ideas? What is it? It's to ask yourself those questions, because sometimes it's by asking yourself that question that it actually it shows the mirror. Like, for example, to me, when I was looking at my boyfriend and being like, oh, he's being so negative. So why does that bother me? Is that affecting my negativity? It shouldn't. It was, but it shouldn't. And so then it got to me thinking, okay, well, how can I keep my vibration and my positivity up regardless of other people? And it made me realize that it was such a good tool, because I want to be able to do that and not be affected necessarily by everybody else. And once you've asked yourself those questions, you can see, okay, am I staying or leaving? So if you decide to leave, then that's another question. My thing now is, if you decide to stay, here are some tools that can really help. One, I think it's important to love the person unconditionally and to remember that we are all on our own paths. There's not one right path. There's not somebody who is superior. There's not somebody who is inferior. We're just different, and we're all perfectly perfect the way we are. And so to remember that about ourselves, but then to remember it about others and to love them unconditionally, and to remember that love is the best way, in a way, to make them feel safe, to make them feel safe to be whoever they are, so that you can also feel safe whoever you are. But you want to give that back to the person and let them know that there's freedom there for them to explore, for them to see, even if it's very different from what you think. There are so many beautiful, lovely, grounded, kind, gentle, beautiful people out there who have nothing to do with spirituality, and they want nothing to do with it. And I think that it's actually bad to try to change them in any way. The second thing is, As I said, do not lead by persuasion, lead by example. That is definitely something that I'm still working on. I sometimes just get so excited that I want to lead by persuasion or telling people to do certain things, but in the end, that actually doesn't really help, and it actually creates more resistance. And the best way is to lead through example, which means that if you are working on being more positive and seeing life in a more positive way, and then you see the vibration, because that is why I wanted to share it with these people, is because I started seeing the benefits and seeing all the things that were going so well thanks to these practices. Of course, I wanted to share. But in the end, the best way to share is have them see it and notice it. And actually, even with my partner, I have noticed that. I've noticed that ever since I've kind of stopped trying to push all this stuff onto him, the positivity in him is coming back. I hear him say things like, "Ooh, I want to get into meditating." And I'm super excited about that. And then I sometimes maybe jump on that and try to be like, "Oh, well, when are you going to start?" And I need to back off. But I realize it's not by actually preaching them that they have the better influence. It's by doing them. The third thing is to keep checking in with yourself and to remember that nothing is fixed. Your relationship is not fixed. Yourself is not fixed. That person is not fixed. And so let's say, for example, in my case, right now I'm learning to love unconditionally and to learn what I can get from these relationships. But maybe in a year or two, I'll be like, you know what? They really are no longer in alignment. And at that point, I might decide to leave. But then again, maybe I'll decide to stay. I think that there is nothing fixed or permanent, and that it's okay to be exploring different paths. Also, to remember that nothing is fixed. Let's say you do decide to leave a relationship. That relationship might come back in your life, and vice versa. As I just said, sometimes we decide to stick it through and learn things, and then later down the road, we decide to separate. I think what's really important is that you tune in with yourself, to always keep checking and to make sure that it is part of your alignment and that it feels good to you. So I hope this video has helped you be able to decide whether or not this relationship is for you, and also to be able to check in with yourself to see what is good in a relationship, and also where, even if there might be friction or resistance, it could actually still be good and good for your own growth. As you've seen, there is no perfect formula. There's no one size fit all. You're going to have to dive in and ask yourself the questions so that you can make the best decision with the relationship in question. Let me know in the comments how you feel about your relationships, what's going on. Are you in the phase where you're learning? Are you in the phase where you know you need to leave? Are you in the phase where you're starting to realize that some of the things that are frustrating are actually just a mirror about yourself? I'd love to know. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next video. I'm sending you so much love and so much laughter.